Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we are once again joined by Aimee Cloughley. And today we are digging into the nitty gritty of the process of investing, specifically talking about due diligence in this one. So Aimee, again, thanks for joining us on the show. And within this episode, we're going to cover the questions that investors often have. We're going to talk about the concerns they have and then the things that we often see go wrong within this due diligence process. And I know that Aimee is an expert at this, having run the process or walked investors through, about 400 investors through this due diligence process. So she knows the ins and outs and what people are thinking. So Aimee, why don't you start by walking us through what are the questions most investors have when they're going through a due diligence process, especially if they're first-time investors?
So I get a lot of questions regarding extensions. When a client signs up to a sale and purchase, they usually sign up for 10 working days. A lot of clients get concerned that might not be enough time to arrange their finance, to travel down and do a site visit. So they like just to know that there's a little bit of leeway if they need an extension on that property.
And what are some of those reasons? Like, can you give us an example of when I think even today we've had some extensions that you've been requesting. How does that actually work? What's the process?
So Ed, we get it quite frequently. I'd contact the client's solicitor and get them to contact the vendor's solicitor. They will request the extension from there. So we usually get about 2 to 5 working days, just depending on what the client needs that extension for. Sometimes for finance, you're looking around about 5.
And actually, that's an interesting point that Aimee takes care of this for anyone that we're dealing with, any investors that we're working with, because in a normal situation where you're dealing with a real estate agent, normally you would go to your lawyer and then you might not necessarily get granted the extension. So I know where there's a lot of heat in a market. So for example, somewhere like Wellington, where they're often wanting unconditional offers in the first instance, it could be that there's a backup offer on a property, so you're not going to necessarily be granted that extension, or the vendor might just simply say no. They might have had someone sniffing around at a higher price, and actually a property that I was trying to buy recently, exactly this happened. I asked for a 24-hour extension, and they said no. In the instance where Aimee's dealing with it, not only will she speak to the investor's solicitor to get the legal side of it done, but we'll often let the vendor know that we expect that extension be granted. So I don't think there'd ever be a time that we were told no on extensions, Aimee, not that I can think of.
No, that's right. We work with the developers. We let them know the reasoning behind the client wanting that extension, just to guarantee that getting approved for the client.
And we had one that wasn't finance related, the extension. What was that for?
Yes, that's right. I've had clients wanting to come down for a site visit. A lot of clients can't come during the week to work, so they'll come down the following weekend. So we'll just get extended until potentially the next Monday or Tuesday.
Fantastic. But then I know with site visits as well, not everybody wants one. You know, they don't necessarily want to inspect a show home or a plot of land before they go unconditional.
Yeah, that's right. I've had a lot of clients not wanting to come down because at this stage it is really just a plot of grass. For them, they may be comfortable just receiving photos. I've done a video tour for them, so I'll go through.
So that was a completed one that we sold. One of our existing clients had bought, I think, from memory.
Yes, that's right, out in Prebbleton and Christchurch there. So I just went to the property for them. I showed them exterior and did a walkthrough for them so they knew what they were purchasing without having to fly down. I
think that was one of my clients, and they're actually having a look at that property when they're in Christchurch in the up and coming months, but they are existing investors. They've worked with us before, and certainly I think the site visits are maybe not as important for investors who have done this before, particularly with us, because they understand that it really is just about the numbers. But certainly for new investors, I think site visits are a good part of that sleep test. Am I going to be able to sleep at night owning this property, and whether or not it's a plot of land or partway through construction, or in a lot of cases finished as well, having a site visit might be part of that sleep test.
That's right. I have a lot of investors that come down following the site visit. They feel a lot more comfortable just going out out to that plot of land to get an idea of the atmosphere out there,
Yes.
how noisy it is, what's surrounding it.
Yes.
They feel a lot better once they've gone to another completed build from the developer. Even if it's not in the same area, you see the
Yes.
fixtures and fittings, you build a relationship with the developer and you trust them.
And so actually, that's a really interesting point. So one of the big things that we've probably changed in the last couple of years while you've been here, Aimee, is getting the developers wherever possible to meet with a client during that due diligence phase. So regardless of where it is in the country, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Tauranga, Hamilton, trying to get that developer to come out and meet the client so they can actually get a cut of the jib, so to speak. And it's smiling, so I'll take that one as approved. And actually get an idea of who's actually going to be producing this investment property. And I think that makes a big difference in the client's comfort. Would you agree, Aimee?
Yes, absolutely. It makes people feel a lot more trustworthy.
And similarly, Aimee, talk to us about some of the concerns that investors have when they're going through this due diligence period. What do they sometimes worry about?
So I've had investors concerned about whether 3 or 4 bedroom properties matter. We have spoken a lot of times to the property manager team here in Christchurch, Venture Management. So they don't have any trouble renting 3 or 4 bedrooms. It's really just, it's a matter of what the tenant is after. It doesn't, it's not so much about practicality, the size of the kitchen. It's rather the number of the bedrooms for the number of children that they have.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And certainly investors that we work with, I often notice that they'll apply what they live in to the property they're looking at investing in. And so, for example, you deal with someone who might have a 230 square metre 4-bedroom house or 5-bedroom house, it's probably going to be fairly spacious. And then when they're looking at a 4-bedroom 165 square metre house, which is completely sufficient for an investment, they consider it quite small. Then if you deal with the contrary, where you deal with someone who's maybe living in a 133-bedroom square house, they look at the investment and think, we'd live here. And so you've just got to take away any of that emotion when you are doing due diligence and consider what makes a good investment, which is what we try and achieve by properties that we recommend.
That's right. I've got a lot of investors that come down. So they look at these bedrooms and they think, can I actually fit a double bed in here? Reality is we always ensure that you can fit a queen bed in there. So that makes it suitable for any type of tenant.
And Aimee as well, talk to us about some of the things that can go wrong within a due diligence period. You've run so many of these. Surely it's not all sunshine and daisies.
That's right. We do have some slip ups sometimes. We have some great professionals, but they get busy too. We've had times where they can miss an email coming through requesting an extension, or they miss just a client having some queries. So often I'll have investors coming to me. And then they'll have a bunch of questions. I will then reach out to their solicitor just to follow the solicitor up and ensure that they're getting back in a timely manner. Yeah,
so it could be a solicitor, a property manager, a mortgage broker who's missed something within their process. And it's really important for anybody investing that if you don't have an Aimee or somebody project managing the due diligence process for you, that you're really diligent about following up these, your professionals, your mortgage broker, that they're getting your finance approved, that your solicitors requested the title and the limb and reviewing that on your behalf. Because if they miss your email or aren't doing something and you're in a really hot market like Andrew just described before, like in Wellington, then you might require an extension and you might not actually be granted it, and you might miss out on the property that you actually did want to purchase because you'd forgotten to follow up your professionals, because you forgot that they hadn't got back to you about XYZ thing. So that's something really important to be quite diligent about.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that in DD you've got a lot of moving parts, and Aimee sort of acts as that central person to make sure everyone's doing their part and reminds them of their responsibility to get it done on time. So, things like mortgages are taking longer nowadays. So the day that an investment property is put under a due diligence contract, Aimee ensures that every person has it, the accountant, the property manager, the lawyer and the mortgage broker, to make sure each and every person can do their part with the allotted amount of time.
That's right. Without each of these pieces of the puzzle, if everyone's not updated on the progress of that investor, then we can have everything fall apart.
And I know one of the things that investors often miss when going through this due diligence process on a standard property is not seeing a property manager before they purchase a property. Many investors might go in and find a property, they think it looks quite good, purchase it, and then they go and see a property manager. I mean, why is it quite important that you see a property manager through the due diligence process?
So I've had a lot of investors query the need to see a property manager under DD. I find that once they've met with a property manager, they feel a lot more confident, so they can get the property manager's perspective on a certain area. The type of tenants that property manager expects, and then also the comparative rents based on their current portfolio.
So checking rents and checking maybe vacancy rates in that area, their experience, all those kind of things, I think is really, really important. And like Aimee says, the type of tenant that it's going to relate to, that it's going to be suitable for, because also maybe, the area doesn't lend itself to young professionals, but that was who you were expecting to rent it out to. There was a case where one of the developers that we deal with had difficulties selling some properties which were clearly built for kind of professionals, but in an area that was more suited to families, and they really struggled to sell those. So knowing these kind of things is really important. And again, just to make sure that the property manager and the numbers that you've got are in alignment, both from a rent perspective and also from a fees perspective.
And Aimee, lastly, I know one of the things that's pushing DD or due diligence over time at the moment is people are waiting to get their valuation until their mortgage is approved. Do you just want to walk us through why that's the case at the moment and that effect that it has on the due diligence process?
So at the moment, banks are taking a lot longer to process everything. So we're just requiring an extra, it could be 5 days at the end of the due diligence process, just to arrange that valuation to be carried out.
Now, it's probably one of those things that we're in a unique situation at the moment where banks are being incredibly conservative. And so they might say no to a slam dunk deal. And so that's where clients probably hold off getting that valuation to last, because it is going to cost them. Most of the other steps in due diligence can be done at a relatively low cost or no cost at all, certainly if using some of the professionals that we would recommend. But the valuation is one of those things. Once you pay for it, that you've paid for it, there's no going back, even if the valuation doesn't come in at the number that you want. And so that is probably the one thing that holds finance up at the moment. But again, if you're dealing with Aimee, she takes care of all that pain point for you. Actually, and just one thing that I wanted to ask Aimee, so you handle all of this for our Christchurch clients because this is where you're based, but you also manage the due diligence process for all of our clients over the rest of the country or investing in the rest of the country. How do you facilitate the site visits in that instance?
So we've got teams based up in the Auckland area. We've also got a lady in the Wellington area. So if there's site visits in Auckland, what I'll do is I'll tee up one of the team up there to take you around Auckland. If you've got a property that you're investing in Hamilton, they'll drive you down to Hamilton for the day, show you around and make sure you're comfortable with the area.
So we always make sure that one of our team is there if any investor is looking at investing somewhere in the country that they don't live at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, let's ramp it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you want to learn more about property with Andrew and I, why not check out our No Money Worries email course? This is where we've put together our top 9 lessons about property investment, and we've even sent you some homework so you can think about, well, how have I invested in the past, and how might that need to change in the future? I'm going to link to that in the show notes, or just go to opespartners.co.nz/no money worries. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And we're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.